And when we rely on private generosity to solve public problems, we're moving from a system based on rights to one based on generosity. Good morning, afternoon, evening, night to you all, wherever you are in our glorious world, and welcome to the Future Cooperation podcast. I'm just back from the Skoll conference in Oxford, and today I want to tell you how I spell the word philanthropy. We live in an age of cascading crises, as well, of course, as immense human potential. Climate disruption, pandemics, digital insecurity, widening inequality, rising fragility. These are not isolated problems, they're interconnected, and they demand collective action at a scale we've rarely attempted before. Yet at precisely the moment when coordinated public leadership is most urgently needed, governments are retreating. International budgets are being slashed, multilateral institutions are underfunded, and I think maybe what I'm most worried about, public ambition for global problem solving is in decline. And into that void has stepped a growing cadre of philanthropic actors, wealthy individuals, private foundations, corporate social responsibility initiatives. And they're funding vaccines, climate projects, education projects, other health projects. And in many cases, they've driven real progress where governments have faltered. And I've started to call this, in this new context, philanthropy, F-I-L-L, anthropy. And that means philanthropy that fills the spaces vacated by public retreat, philanthropy that substitutes rather than supplements what should be a public function. And that distinction between supplementing and substituting is at the heart of everything I want to talk about today. Let me be clear right from the start. This is not an argument against philanthropy, far from it. Mega foundations today rival or exceed many national aid agencies in spending power, and they've supported bold experiments that governments were unwilling or too slow to back. A great example is accelerating vaccine delivery through platforms like Gavi and CEPI and other large-scale disease eradication efforts. Or in climate, private foundations, as well as technological advance, have funded advocacy and policy reform that shifted governments' positions. These contributions are real, they matter. And the vibes, by the way, at the Skoll meeting in Oxford were so positive and inspiring. You know, it was full of people working super hard and determined to make this world better, despite, let's say, a difficult political climate. But philanthropy works best when it does what public systems can't. It takes risks, it moves quickly, it backs neglected causes, it funds innovation before there's political will to commit public money. It shines brightest when it operates within a strong public framework. The problem is, that's exactly what is now not happening. In the early 20th century, before the rise of the modern welfare state and multilateral system, many vital services, from education to global health, depended on the largesse of wealthy individuals and corporate foundations. Philanthropic titans like Carnegie and Rockefeller dominated global agenda setting, but their giving, however generous, was discretionary and undemocratic. There was no right to support, only the hope of it. The creation of public institutions like the UN, WHO, post-war development banks, and of course at the national level as well, was meant to move us beyond that model, towards cooperation at the global level based on shared responsibility, stable financing, and country ownership. And now we risk returning to the pre-multilateral logic, where the scale and shape of global responses depend on the personal priorities of the wealthy. This is becoming ever more evident in global conferences, including the one I was just at last week, where the retreat of official development finance was treated almost as a given in perpetuity. There is innovation in private finance, excitement about philanthropic platforms, but little emphasis on rebuilding the public foundation of global cooperation. It feels like a quiet surrender, that the era of large-scale international public finance and leadership is over, and the future lies in filling the gaps however we can. Philanthropy. But that would be a mistake. A new logic for an old mistake. We must not outsource the global commons to discretionary funding. Public finance is not just one option. It's the only kind rooted in accountability, equity, and collective legitimacy. And philanthropy should help, but within a strong public framework that puts rights before charity and long-term justice over short-term fixes. We don't need to revive the 19th century models of benevolent giving. We need 21st century institutions bold enough to lead. When philanthropic or private actors begin to replace public finance rather than complement it, we enter dangerous territory, and the consequences are systemic. First, philanthropy is volatile. It depends on personal decisions, foundation endowments, market conditions. Funding levels can rise or fall with a billionaire's shifting priorities or a board's changing strategy. It does not offer the predictability and stability that long-term global challenges demand. Second, it lacks democratic accountability. Foundations are not elected. Their decisions are not subject to public scrutiny, parliamentary oversight, or global governance frameworks. There are no formal checks on their influence and no structural guarantee that they'll respond to the most vulnerable. Third, private giving can reflect personal interests over global needs. High-profile donations concentrate on issues that resonate with individual philanthropists, leaving other priorities underfunded. Research agendas get skewed, funding landscapes get distorted. And perhaps most fundamentally, philanthropy cannot set legitimate global priorities. That has to come from public processes, however messy, however slow, however imperfect. There is no private substitute for democratic mandate. And when we rely on private generosity to solve public problems, we're moving from a system based on rights to one based on generosity, from one based on collective obligation to one based on individual choice, from a system where everyone has a claim to one where support depends on being chosen. That's not just a technical shift. It's a political and moral shift. Let me give you 3 recent examples of what this looks like in practice. Take global health. The COVID pandemic revealed both the potential and the peril of private-led global response. While philanthropic actors helped speed vaccine development, the absence of adequately financed public leadership meant distribution remained profoundly unequal. And more locally, there was an article in African Business this month, and I'll link to it in the notes, that governments in Africa are turning to philanthropy to fill holes in the health budget left by aid cuts. Philanthropy. Or take climate. In January 2025, the US renewed its withdrawal from the Paris Agreement, and billionaire Michael Bloomberg stepped in to personally fund America's share of the UNFCCC, an extraordinary act of individual commitment. But the continuity of a core multilateral institution, one designed to represent the collective will of 194 governments, cannot depend on the personal decision of one man. I know this is obvious, but sometimes the obvious examples are useful. That's not a stable foundation for planetary action. Or digital governance, huge issue at the Skoll meeting this week. Across AI policy, data rights, and internet governance, the vacuum left by slow-moving public institutions is now increasingly filled by foundations, Omidyar, Ford, Open Society, and others. Valuable work. But who governs the internet must not be a question answered by private actors, however well-intentioned. And in each of these cases, the story is the same. Public responsibility retreats, philanthropy, F-I-L-L, steps in, and the result is a patchwork, boutique initiatives rather than coordinated global responses rooted in public purpose. And when that becomes the default, the long-term costs accumulate. Public trust erodes, sovereignty weakens, strategic coherence is lost, and perhaps most damaging of all, the public realm loses its purpose. The state is recast as an administrator of outsourced services, a manager, not a leader. Of course, there is a deep irony at the heart of today's global financing landscape. Some of the most progressive voices in international cooperation are now billionaire-funded foundations, institutions whose very existence reflects the same extreme wealth concentration that undermines the democratic multilateralism they often seek to reform. Foundations like those funded by Gates and Rockefeller are championing causes that public institutions have neglected: universal health coverage, pandemic preparedness, climate justice, equitable AI governance. In many multilateral spaces, these foundations are not just present, they're leading. And yet, the resources they deploy originate, ironically, in the very system of global oligarchy that erodes the fiscal base of governments, skews investment priorities, and concentrates power in the hands of a few. Many of these foundations fund policy changes, progressive taxation, stronger state capacity, redistribution, that if implemented, would ultimately constrain the very fortunes that created them. Good on them. But this raises a question worth sitting with. Can we entrust systemic transformation to the stewards of systemic inequality? The answer is not to reject these foundations, but it is to situate them clearly, not as neutral saviors, but as powerful actors, navigating a paradox. Their contributions are real, but they must not substitute for the return of public financing, public purpose, and democratic control. So, what's the alternative? The answer is not to push philanthropy out, of course. It's to rebalance, to put public finance back at the center, and to be clear about why it matters. The case for public international finance rests on four things that no private actor, philanthropic or for profit, can provide. First, accountability. Public funds answer to legislatures, to citizens, to oversight. Private funds answer only to donors and boards. Stability. Markets move with cycles. Philanthropy follows the convictions of individuals. Public institutions are designed to act over decades. Second, stability. Markets move with cycles. Philanthropy follows the convictions of individuals. Public institutions are designed to act over decades and to step in sometimes counter-cyclically when private flows dry up. Equity. States are duty-bound to serve all people, not just those who are profitable, visible, or compelling. Only a rules-based public system can guarantee fair, rights-based resource allocation. And then fourth, strategic coherence. Global challenges don't respect silos. Only public finance pooled through multilateral institutions can coordinate across countries, sectors, and time horizons. Only public institutions carry the sovereign authority to lead. History shows us what's possible when governments come together in good faith. In 1948, in the wake of unimaginable global violence, nations of vastly different ideologies agreed on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In 2015, world leaders adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, a universal commitment to leaving no one behind. These moments were imperfect, but they were profound. They remind us that when governments act collectively, they are capable of giving voice to our better angels. We must defend and renew that tradition, not abandon it. So, what do we need to do? We're not asking philanthropy to disappear. We're asking it to be reframed. And to be fair, many philanthropists get this and are leading it. Philanthropy works best when it funds experimentation before governments are ready to commit, when it supports advocacy and civic mobilization, when it bridges silos and backs the unconventional, when it acts as a catalyst, not a commander. But for that to work, governments must recommit to funding global common challenges. Multilateral institutions must reassert their strategic role. We must all rebuild the case for public finance as a matter of strategic necessity and mutual interest. Not charity, necessity. Yes, public institutions are often inefficient, sometimes bureaucratic, occasionally corrupt. All true. Philanthropy is a symptom of political failure, not a sustainable model. The world is too interconnected and the risk too great to leave our shared future to the discretion of billionaires or the goodwill of volunteers. We need public investment in the public interest. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe and like and comment and all that stuff, and tune in again for more discussion and analysis with some of the world's leading thinkers and doers.